Okay, here in Procreate, let's start sketching something. I chose my tapered flat brush, and I noticed that it has some odd lines to it that didn't happen in Photoshop. That's simply a spacing issue. Decrease the spacing, and we have our brush as we expect. I'll hit done to kind of save that in my current session, and I'm on my layer here, just the layer that Procreate makes for me, and I will start sketching. And I think what I'll do is I'm going to sketch this owl character that's appeared in a few of my paintings and some of my own personal illustrations. He's got a big sort of head like this. You can see, by the way, my brush settings are over on the left, obviously. I'll decrease the opacity a little and the brush size a little bit more. His beak is over here. Just like with the baby dragon from the Krita demo, I'm just roughing this in. I'm not committing myself to a fully resolved line drawing, although you could easily have this on its own layer, which it is, and then make a new layer over top and refine your lines. For those of you who are more linear, line-based with your art, which I'm not. I'm more of a painterly type artist. But for those of you who want the lines to be cleaner, oftentimes it's a good workflow to start this way. By the way, one conflict I ran into with my gesture controls is that when you push and hold with your finger, Procreate brings up the eyedropper or sample tool. You click and hold and you can drag this around in sample colors. I previously had my gesture controls though set up so that a finger touch and hold would invoke the quick menu. I disabled that for this painting because I want the finger touch to invoke the sample tool here. When I push and hold the pen, it does not sample. When I push and hold my finger, it samples. That's just how I like to have it set up sometimes. In this case, I want it that way. So I turned off my gesture controls accordingly. Of course, you can customize your gesture controls very quickly in Procreate, and you can have different workflows. Okay, so I've got this little owl character roughed in, and I think just for flavor, this is kind of the tree that he's perched on, and just for flavor, I want to just drag in a background color. So I'll go to my background color, and I can pick it like this. Maybe something in the lights. Done. I'll make a new layer with the plus sign and hold and click to drag it below. And on that layer, I'll just grab just something flat, like a flat texture like that. And let's just quickly paint in. This is a layer underneath the lines, which is why the lines are still appearing dark over top of it. Just want to paint in some kind of hint of trees and not even really paint it in any kind of detail, but just block it in. Let's have the color kind of gradate itself to a more orangey tone. The drawing you see there is nothing to write home about. It's just the barest of starting points. Anyway, here I've got just a basic brown tree color to block this in. There's no such thing as a tree color, but it's just brown. And here with a hard round brush, I'll continue. And now back to my owl layer. And back to my tapered flat brush, which retains its settings. When I changed it at the outset of the sketch, those settings will be respected by Procreate now. Kind of want to just increase the brush size, sort of map out the light and shadow on this guy. It's pretty basic. I think I'll have the light coming down from above and illuminating him sort of like this. He'll cast a bit of a shadow on the tree like that. And the whole thing actually is going to be darker. Like the owl is going to be overall darker than the background. So I'll go with something like this as a simple block in. I'll make a new layer, click the N, set it to, let's go down, set it to overlay. And this will allow me to block in just some colors. I'll grab a brush, the hard round here, which is, actually, you know what? Let's try the watercolor round. And the owl's head is bluish. So with this watercolor brush on overlay mode, I can just start blocking in basic colors. I can also try changing the layer. Let's see, soft light, hard light. Maybe hard light is a nice one for this. Kind of insists its color a bit more thoroughly than overlay does. There's some nice sort of orangey tones in the belly. I'm just going to block in just some color transitions almost at random here. Decrease the brush size a little bit. Not random, but like I want zones of the head. I want the head to be mostly blue with like some reddishness in the ears. Maybe just indicate some reds around the eyes. Just, it's all very loose, right? So just kind of giving me a basic palette within which I'll work on this whole thing. You can even use the the hard light mode to block in lighter stuff like the whites of the eyes here, which I'll go in with a ochre light yellowish tone. And the drawing is super rough, but that's okay. We will continue to work at this. If I went in sometimes at this point, I'll hide the line layer and see what it's looking like. The only thing that doesn't look very good though, because all my values, my shading was included in my line layer. So I kind of need the line layer for now. But what I'll probably do is start merging things down. And to do that, I'll click on the icon of layer 2 and say merge down, then click on the icon of layer 3 and say merge down. And now I'm basically back to one layer, which is, as you guys know, how I like to work. But you could easily have made a new layer over everything and worked on that. And that way, if you did that, you'd have your fully adjustable layers underneath. So in terms of using layers, there's no right or wrong to any of this stuff. It's just however you want to work. But now that I'm on one layer, I could like get my smudge tool, right? And I can start smudging this around. Let's decrease the brush size a little bit. I'm on the oil brush, by the way, just in the painting category. I'm on the oil brush smudge tool. And this will allow me to almost get the sense of hair, or fur in this case. This owl is a furry little guy. And I can really sculpt the shapes with this. You know, I can, if the eyes were too big or too narrow or whatever it is, I can just sculpt into this. This brush doesn't really paint its own color. It, you know, paints the colors that are already there, smudges them around. So if I want some of that yellow, I can drag the yellow into the head. If I want the blue, I can drag the blue upward into the yellow background. So it kind of takes where you start your stroke and takes that color and merges it, just like it would if this were oil paint. Wherever your brush starts, your brush picks up that color, whatever color's on the canvas physically, and smears it around. So increase the brush size a bit and just start taking that tapestry of color that I laid in, which looked so rough, and it still does, but I'm now giving it a bit more complexity by way of getting all these little soft edges mingling with each other. And this fluffy little owl is starting to take shape. All right, at this point, let's go back into my chalky brush, which is a very controllable, squarish brush. It's got a bit of texture, but nothing too crazy. What I like to do is I'll sample some of the blue here, reduce its value, that is, make it darker, and I can start using that as some of the shadow tones here. Another good way to work with shadow tones, I'll show you a new way, is to go to make a new layer. Set that layer to multiply. As we've seen many times, it's up here, multiply. And then you can reduce the layer opacity a little bit if you want. Then I will I'll just grab my hard round brush with wet edges on. And with that, I'll get a light color with a large brush size. And whoops, not that big. Undo that. Reduce the opacity and start darkening these areas of shadow. And again, it might be worth it to actually go into that brush setting and change the spacing lower. Hit done. The nice thing about multiply mode though is I can pick any different color and use that as my darkening shadow pass. So let's see, the wing is going to cast a shadow here on the body. The body itself is turning under here. So this is where you can start adding that dimension to your character. And even though my paint strokes are very rough, slowly but surely, every step of the way, things get a bit tighter because I'm making drawing decisions every step of the way. If, for those of you who are newcomers to art, you might think that the line drawing is where you figure out all your drawing decisions, and you can approach it that way. However, another way to approach it is to start with a very loose line drawing where things are only generally figured out, very broadly arrived at, and use the painting process as a way to tighten up your image. And then that's the way I choose to work most of the time. And what's nice about that is you can let the process help you choose how far you want to take it. Whereas if you always need to start with a very tight line drawing, which is certainly okay, but if you always need that, it might be difficult to follow a process that allows you to be fully creative because you might feel roped in to your line drawing. And that's something I used to battle with. I used to really require a very worked out line drawing where, every eyelash was included. Now it's just the opposite. But this is just my own art journey. Everyone else, or everyone's different, and you might find great use in starting with very tight line drawings. So all this advice just take with a grain of salt. I'm mostly in this class these are just little anecdotes to keep me talking as I paint. But most of the time, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Go back to this color picker. I want to get a big shadow to show the plane change of this owl. I think at this point, what I'll do is I'll go into the liquefy tool with a big brush size and the push feature. And let's just see, oh, it's on a layer, right? So let me go merge this layer down, click it, merge down, then go back into the liquefy tool. And my settings are there, and I can just move this guy, sculpt it around. This is tons of fun. Get a bit more tilt to the head. The irises are not looking in the same direction. I'll fix that later. It's one of those things that you can do with painting, be it traditional or digital like this. If you're painting opaquely, which we are here, this would be considered like similar to an oil painting or something, or an acrylic painting. Just paint right over stuff. So just like the baby dragon, I'm really interested in squishing things together to make it cute. And just pulling this around. All right, let's go with that. Just clicking on the adjustments tool to exit that dialog. I think at this point I'll start working on, let's see, let me get another one of my brushes. Let's try the rake brush. And you got to play with the brush size. Something like that might work. Let's see if we can work up some lights on his belly here, or his upper chest. Maybe a slightly lower brush size. Now the thing with brushes like this rake brush, and I mentioned this in a different section of the class, is it can really start looking repetitive because those rake strokes are, by definition, noticeable patterns. That's the whole point of this brush. It makes that rake-like pattern. So it might be helpful at some point to go into your smudge tool and start smudging this around. But I'll put a generous helping of strokes with this brush first. Before I do that, I want to fully silhouette the character here. This is a crucial bit of negative space I'm working out here. Anyway, what I can do now is just switch over to the smudge tool, which I'm still on that same smudge brush I was earlier, and just continue to smudge out some of these rake strokes. So some of them, will retain their identity, and some of them won't. Some of them will just get smudged in. I'm going to try and blend a lot of these colors as the owl sort of is perched on that tree. I don't want to have a whole lot of information there. I kind of want it lost. I'm trying to use very directional strokes to move in the direction of the fur. So if the hair is flowing over the chest, I'm trying to have my brush strokes move in that same way. It's kind of like how you can paint hair without having to paint hair. Let the direction of the stroke imply some of that for you. So like, as the hair just kind of juts out of his head here, I'll use the smudge tool to help me do that. I want to work on the perspective of this eye too. It should be partially hidden in perspective there. Okay, let's go back to the brush, and the irises are starting to bother me. They're not there. I'll switch my brush as well. Sometimes I can always zoom in, of course. So when I'm painting in Procreate, I'm constantly switching from the Apple Pencil, which I use for all my brush strokes, but zooming is done with your fingers, rotating, and sampling is also done with my fingers. So I'm always switching. You develop a kind of muscle memory from switching that pen to active on the screen to held by your pinky so you can activate the smudge tool with your finger. Anyway, let's go back to my rake brush here and start getting some variety of brush type into the eyes. Constantly going back and forth with it, back and forth. Let's see, feel like I need to just shake up the colors. Let's make a new layer. Let's go set it to, let's say color dodge. Zoom out. And I'll go in with, let's go with airbrush. Let's get a soft airbrush, low opacity, big brush size. Let's put in some of these autumn colored lights. This is where my choice of painting tool, which is the Wacom tablet I showed you in the intro, it feels different than painting on glass. Like the iPad has a glass, screen, right? And the Apple Pencil is this hard sort of plastic pencil. For me, I'm not used to that interaction so much. I mean, I use Procreate sometimes, but of the 3 apps that I've demoed in this course, Procreate is my least used, not because I like it the least, I don't find myself on the iPad all that much. So for me, I'm a little bit slower in Procreate. I want to make a new layer, set it to multiply mode, and still on my airbrush, I want to continue to work on some of these shadowed areas. Let's go with a redder color. Again, I accidentally changing the layout of my color palette. And then let's reduce the airbrush size, bring up its opacity, and I can maybe even use it to block in just some of the feet. But again, the owl is resting on the tree in such a way that it's really dark shadow there. Things are largely being lost. His feet can be really, really suggested. And they're also covered in fluff. And I can use this multiply layer that I'm on to indicate little shadowed areas in the wings. I'm trying to make my shadows always have color to them. It helps keep the image colorful when your shadows don't just go dead gray. This is sort of a color theory topic. If you keep your shadows colorful, it'll help keep the image feeling colorful by extension. I don't like that stroke. Let's undo that one. One thing about Procreate, because the undo button's all the way down there, you can set up gesture controls if you want, but because I have to travel just those few inches to hit the undo button, I use it less and less. So, which is a good thing. I find in Procreate, I commit more to my layers, or to my strokes. Let's make a new layer, just accept the default normal mode. Let's go grab a painting brush, try this gouache brush, and I want to sample this blue, and let's go get just some lighter parts of the owl. I kind of want a more hairy brush, so let's go with this old brush, it's called. The one I used for my smudge tool, actually. This is nice. It kind of comes preloaded with a bit of texture, and it has a smudgy quality to it as well, which is why I chose it for the smudge tool. It's literally got a smudgy quality, which ties right in with the smudge tool. But even as a paintbrush, it's kind of nice. Okay, so I'm combining all my layers down just back to that one layer. This allows me to paint opaquely over everything. And I'm just working on those irises and the eyeballs in general. And what I like about how this is starting to shape up now is there's a clear layering of brushes and brush strokes, like different types of brush strokes, obviously different colors and subtly different values. You know, like that iris is not just one dark color. It's got just variations, and now here I am adding some more color variations to it, but that's already on top of something that has a variety. And my general view on things is that variety is interesting. Now, it's not the default, like it's not a be-all end-all. It's not like you only need variety to be interesting. Like you need some things to be harmonious too and repetitive to some degree. But variety is really the key to interest. And it's a kind of a form of contrast. If you think of like value contrast, that's what our eye detects. That's what we're attracted to. And variety and mark making and brush strokes and, you know, brush width and brush type and brush length and brush opacity, those kinds of varieties are also forms of contrast. And it's any type of contrast you can get in there will help make things interesting. Now, again, it's not like you need constant variety in everything every time. You do need to balance that with some, you know, very predictable things as well. You know, for example, the two eyeballs should be the same size. They're in perspective, so they're slightly different because of that. But, you know, it would make more sense for the owl to have eyes that are the same size rather than variety in the size of the eyeball. So, you know, there are times where, of course, you don't want that. But in general, when it comes to your mark making, variety is really the key. So that hopefully can help explain why at the beginning of this painting I was working with pretty broad, like airbrushy or, you know, soft brush marks. Like remember when I colored the owl's head blue, I was using that hard light layer with that watercolor big brush, and things happened pretty quick. Like the lay-in happened pretty quick. But if you look at the brushstrokes I'm making now, they're much smaller and they're much more controlled, even though they're still sketchy. I'm not trying to say they're fully in control. They're still pretty sketchy, but they're smaller, they're tighter, they're more intricate, let's say, more delicate maybe is a better word. And I'm scrutinizing things more. Like I'm undoing a little bit more and smudging little areas just to get the, you know, you can see me working on this beak right now. I'm working this transition, this 3-color transition, like blue at the top, sort of violet in the middle and orangey red at the bottom. I'm working on these small things now. And this is a natural progression for me in an art piece. I do tend to do the lay-in pretty quickly, knowing that my job with the lay-in is not to be totally accurate. Also, this being digital media, you can change anything at any time. There's really no restrictions there. It's not like a watercolor where, you know, that first stroke you put on, that first wash you put on is going to dictate the rest of your strokes, or it's going to at least have a big impact on them. Same with, you know, oil painting. You know, even though oil is pretty malleable, or acrylic, you can scrape it off the canvas if you wanted to. There's still that physical imposition there, whereas digital just doesn't have that. You can just go over stuff with impunity, and it's really cool. You know, if I'm excited for those of you who are truly getting started with digital painting, you're in for a treat. Like it's you know, hopefully this class eliminates the daunting part of it and gets you to the fun part of it, because it really is fun when you're able to just manipulate stuff around like this. Yeah, so, but that's what I'm doing. I'm slowing down, shrinking the brush size a bit, zooming in, although I still try not to zoom in that much, but you know, it helps me to retain perspective of the whole picture, but zooming in where I want to, and when I feel like I need to, and just working this up. And you know, we're at the point now where that crude drawing that I started with is suddenly looking like workable. It's much less crude. It looks like I kind of planned all this, but I didn't really. Like I had the design of the owl in mind, I suppose. But even if I didn't have a previous design of this owl, I still would have approached it in the exact same way. Rough out a sketch that doesn't look like anything good can come of it, and just start working at it. And sometimes those things evolve into your best art pieces. I mean, I paint characters like, I have a green monster character that I've painted for like 10 years now. If you've seen my website, you've definitely seen him. And that started as one of these sketches that I had no idea what I was doing. I just blocked in this ball character. You know, round characters tend to err toward the cutesy side, which is something I'm drawn towards, I guess. And much like this owl, is very round. And suddenly the green monster was born. And I was like, wow, that was fun. Let's keep painting that guy. And then, you know, slowly but surely I evolved his character design the more I painted him. But this is, you know, sketching like this is so fun. Okay, so I want to add some lights with a soft airbrush to like where the cheeks are in this area. I'm thinking of a form that is like this. Let me demonstrate with this red line. If I were to draw forms across the owl's head, it would kind of look like this, down for the eye socket and then out for the cheeks. That's the topology of the head, and like the belly is this round sort of ball shape. That's what I'm going for. So as I adjust the light and shadow transitions here, I'm really, really conscious of the three-dimensional form that I'm rendering. This class doesn't get into fundamentals of form. That's a different class. And again, I have classes that offer stuff like that. You can check out my YouTube videos for all kinds of information on that fundamentals of drawing and painting aspect. But always, like, no matter what I'm doing with these, you know, the fancy schmancy digital tools, what drives everything is a fundamental drawing discipline. You know, I practiced drawing for years before I picked up a paintbrush. I would do life drawing, where you go to a classroom and draw the nude model. I used to go 2 to 3 times a week for years and years. I was regimented. I would go like at least 3 times a week, or at least twice a week for like 5 years straight. And I built up a drawing foundation that way. And you might think that's silly. I'm sitting here drawing a cartoony owl, which is not too hard to draw, and I'm talking about complex figure drawing. But it's really the discipline you get and the knowledge and skill set you obtain from drawing the figure, which is complex and very demanding of you, which allows you to draw simpler things but with more confidence. Well, it allows you to draw anything with more confidence, and it allows you to make to take a simple design like this owl and, you know, give it a kind of sophistication that that maybe you wouldn't have if you were just a beginner artist just starting out. And when I say sophistication, I mean like just believable form and color and edge and value and stuff like that. Even though this is a simple design, there's still a lot that goes into it. I'm getting to the point here where I want to start wrapping this guy up. I've got my oil brush out at a pretty high opacity, and I will sample the background. And what I want to start doing here is carving out with a light color, just kind of carving out the final silhouette of the head. I think I maybe extended the left side of the head here a little too far out. I want to just continue to sculpt into that. I like the oil brush because it's got a bit of a blending property to it, kind of interacts nicely with the paint that's on the canvas. The more you kind of drag the stroke around, the more it blends. To a limited degree, that is. It won't blend as much as the actual smudge tool. So just continuing to work in and out of positive and negative space here with this oil brush. And I'm, you know, just waiting for that bell to go off that tells me that I'm done. I feel like some of the colors are starting to get a little too similar. Like the head is still looking a little too blue to me. So I'm in the greens, like the cooler greens, the greens that are toward blue. I just want to see if I can maybe eliminate some of the blueness or augment it maybe with more of these greenish blues. And what I'll do is decrease the opacity and try and get some of those greenish blues maybe here in the upper chest as well. And then if it becomes too much, I will grab the smudge tool and smudge them in. Go back to the regular brush tool, continue working this way. So for me, a painting and even a sketch like this is all a big search for that final look of the brushes that I personally enjoy. I don't have any exact criteria of how to achieve it, other than it really surrounds variety and having enough variety to keep the audience guessing. Like, I don't want the audience to ever know which brush I used for like the entire thing. That to me is not interesting because it takes away from the illusion, from the art. I want the audience to like enjoy the brushwork on a level where it's like, it's unexpected. And, you know, even a seasoned digital artist can't tell exactly how I did it. And even me, like, I don't even know what brush, I'm going to use one section to the next. That's sort of how I work. And sometimes this leads you into, you know, subpar pictures, to be sure. Like, it's not like this is a recipe for success. But for me, you know, this digital software, one of the best parts about it, you know, be it Procreate or Krita or Photoshop or whatever, it really nurtures exploration. Like, you're not wasting paint. That's the thing with traditional media. Sometimes, especially when I was a student on a budget, I always felt like I was wasting paint when I would do little throwaway sketches in a sketchbook, because, you know, gouache, cadmium red, that's like $15 a bottle. Like, you can't just waste that. Whereas with digital, you don't have that problem. Waste away. You're literally not wasting anything. Maybe time, but you're not wasting that either, because any kind of exploration, in my opinion, is worth it. Because the whole point of exploration is to lead you somewhere. And that's what I feel like I'm doing here. Even though I've been digitally painting for a long time now, I still feel like I'm playing around in a giant sandbox and having a unique experience virtually every time. Here I'm grabbing a smudge tool and kind of smudging this tree into existence. The background is intended to be blurry, almost as though it's shot with like a shallow depth of field or something. So the owl's in focus and the background behind him is blurry. I'll even like smudge out some of the tree here. All right, to finish this up a little bit, I want to add some sharpness. I'll pick the selection tool. I'll just draw a few selections here around the cheekbone, if you can call it that. Pushing the add button will close the selection. Maybe the other cheekbone here. Again, pushing the add button when I'm finished with that selection. Maybe a little bit around the eyes, at least the part of the eyes that are the lightest. Hitting add again with all of these selections. Then I'll go in to the paintbrush tool with a very soft airbrush, soft brush. Whoops, hit done there. Didn't mean to bring that up. Low opacity, high brush size, and also on a new layer set to screen mode. And this is just going to be a lightening pass. Let's see, some kind of neutral warm color should do the trick. And just with my airbrush here, maybe you need a slightly brighter color. Just going to brush into that. Oh, and one thing I never mentioned in the tools section of this class, if I want to alter my selections, like I want to add a bit of feathering, if you press and hold the select tool, it'll recall this window. And now I can say go to the feather option and feather this out a little bit, which again, just adds some softness. So if you ever want to modify your feathering, you can still do that even after you've kind of started painting with those selections. So now, hopefully you guys can see, it's pretty subtle what I'm doing here, but I'm just brightening these sort of cheekbone areas here, and you can see the feathered edge gives it that softness. Otherwise, your selection has a pixel hard edge, which is not always the most aesthetically appealing thing. I'm gonna bring back the selection tool, add another freehand selection around the belly here, being careful to carve out the shadow of the beak. I don't want to affect that. Hit add. Again, let me feather that even more. And with my brush, set to a low color somewhere in here. Something that splits the difference between the warms and the cools. Something around the greens, like a grayish green maybe. And a big brush size. Just continue to lighten this part of the owl. Okay, and then to exit that, I'll just click the selection tool again. And now I'm back to painting. I can go grab my smudge tool, smudge this around. Oops. I'm on the layer, so I'm just smudging my screen mode. So let's just click this, merge down. I always do this in Procreate because my layers are not visible all the time, right? This is why in Photoshop and Krita, I really like to have my layers always visible so I can just physically see what I'm working on. On the iPad, there's just not enough screen space for that. This is also why I personally like to work on one layer, because then I don't have to worry about what information I'm working with. It's all just on that one layer. But that could be just a failure of management on my end. You know, if you're more technically minded than me, you might enjoy sorting through that information as you paint. Every artist is different in that regard. Anyway, just like the Krita sketch, just like the Photoshop sketch, I feel like I could work on this here in Procreate till the cows come home. But what I will do is just make a few last smudgy marks, still trying to be brave with them, and you know, to keep that feeling of a sketch. And let's just spend another minute or so on this and we can call it done. I didn't really end up spending much time on the trees, but if I wanted to just maybe offset the tree's color, I've got my brush tool out. This time it's just a normal airbrush, and I'm just brushing in this greenish hue that I had from my screen pass on the owl. And maybe I need a smaller brush size though to hit some of the smaller branches, and just adding a bit of variety to the tree color. In this case, bringing in some green, which I've painted trees for a long time now, and wood, you know, the bark of trees, they contain a lot of color. So I'm trying to not just have like a, you know, orangey, reddish brown, I'm trying to have different colors. Like even maybe some of the blue of the owl could be found here in the tree. And then maybe I'll even overdo it. Like here, I'll just overdo it a little bit and then get the smudge tool and smudge that in. And just let the software mix these two hues, or however many hues are on there. Just like you would do with wet oil paint. Wet into wet oil paint, or wet into wet watercolor or acrylic or gouache, anything. Whenever you work wet into wet, you're letting the medium do a mixture for you. And all you can do is just maybe help guide it, and depending on the amount you put in, you can help control it. Go back to my brush tool. I think some of this blue is actually interesting. Just want to zing a little bit of it, a little more of it in some of these areas. It just helps harmonize. It's a weird color choice for sure to put blue in a tree, but because there's so much blue in the owl and it's kind of only on the owl's head, I feel like this is an okay move to do. I might even try and include some blues with maybe a harder, maybe drawing brush in where the you know, where the belly is. Not that much. Undo that. I think that was my Apple Pencil glitching a little bit. Sometimes it does that. Sometimes the Apple Pencil, at least my Apple Pencil, will give me a stroke that's like 100% opacity when I don't, you know, I clearly don't mean it to be. Maybe some brushes are more susceptible to that than others. Painting, let's go with a stucco brush with very low opacity and just try and work in, just hinting at some of these blues. Last ditch effort to help harmonize this picture as much as I can. My basic thoughts on harmony here before I close out is you want to feel like colors weave together in your picture. So you don't want anything to be like, oh, it's only blue here and everything else is not blue and it's only red here. You know, I run the risk in this picture of making the head of the owl the only blue part in the picture and making the chest and belly the only reddish orangey part in the picture, and the tree is kind of its own little brown color. Try and find some way, like I say, of weaving these colors together. So, you know, a little bit of blue in this case shows up in the tree, shows up in the belly. A little bit of warmth from the belly shows up in the blue head, which it currently does. You can see those like purpley strokes, and the ears have that reddishness in them. That's really helping achieve color harmony. This, again, as I said before with the fundamentals, this class is not about the art fundamentals. It's about, you know, using the software. But again, I have other classes. I have a whole digital painting series, a trilogy of digital painting series that is me tackling a painting from start to finish. And in that series, I talk all about my thoughts, you know, way more in detail about color harmony and how to preserve your drawing fundamentals while you're also going after interesting color and brushwork and all that stuff, you know, the applied stuff. Here in this class, hopefully these sketches are giving you a taste of the applied stuff, but without, you know, I'm not going too deep into the lecturing of those fundamentals. I'm just playing around with a pen brush here, by the way, putting in some calligraphy, and then if I feel like I've overdone it, I'll just smudge those strokes away. This all adds to the painterliness of the work, hopefully. But when I start doing this little piddly stuff like this, I know that I'm reaching for more things to do in a picture. And whenever I am at that stage, I know from experience that that means I'm done. I should just not bother with doing any more of that. To talk about saving, Procreate automatically saves your work. Brushstroke by brushstroke, it saves every stage. All you have to do is tap on the gallery button at the top left and you'll be able to load your previous piece as well as any other piece you've ever done in Procreate. It's really nice that way. So there's no actual save button. To export it though, click on the wrench icon, then click on share. And I like to save it out as a JPEG. And it just does that. You can save it to wherever you want. You can post it to Twitter or Instagram, or you can just push this save image button. And Procreate will ask your permission to access your photos album. Just hit OK. And now your painting will show up in your regular photos album, which then you can share however you want. And that wraps it up for all 3 demos. I really hope they helped give you additional insight and maybe some inspiration into the digital painting process. As for the class, I want to do one more quick segment where I discuss homework options. You know, things you can do to practice what we've learned here. So I'll see you there for one last chapter.